We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
I'm Bettina Lawton. I'm president of the Executive Women's Roundtable, and that organization endorses this program, Women Talk Business. We have with us tonight Dawn McCoy. We're going into our final segment. We are going to finish up on the 7 leadership building blocks, which, as I said, is the name of Dawn's book, Leadership Building Blocks. We were talking about number 4 when we left, and about time management, which, as I said, I don't usually think of as the creative piece, but it actually is if you don't have enough time and you got way too much to do, which I think is pretty much everybody these days, quite frankly. But then your 5th building block is called Everything is Global. And when I read that, I thought, she's on the Sacramento School Board. What does she mean everything is global? So what is that step? What do you mean by that?
Right. Well, I really wanted to think in terms of a broad scope about how we connect the dots. It was not only about the work that I did as a candidate that carried over into the role as an elected leader, but it was about connecting with people I knew and people I did not know. It was about connecting with people to build coalitions and to build alliances. It was about joining hands. I talk about in the book, will the community please join hands? Will we come together for the sake of these students to help our school district? And more importantly, it was really about learning how to work in tandem with those who I considered to be mentors, those who had supported me, advisors, and those who were coming behind me saying, you know, I might want to run for school board one day, or I might want to be in a leadership position. And so in so many ways, it was about everything is global.
Well, you talk in the book about building relationships. You also talk about being a team player, which I found kind of remarkable because, as you said in our last segment, you were in the minority on a lot of these.
Right.
And of course, in today's political environment, everything is so polarized that if you're in the minority on something, how do you end up being a team player and still being able to move it, as you said you did, to a majority position? How do you do that, practically speaking?
Absolutely. It's essential to look at another person and their perspectives and views and find out where you may have some overlap. It's so important for leaders to take that upper hand, to really be thoughtful about, okay, I may disagree, I may not even see where the other person is coming from, but how do we make sure that we try to find a happy medium? It's about being on the same team. We may have different views, we all do, with different perspectives and a whole different approach. But it's about how do we come together for the sake of the same cause, again, coming back to vision and plan and making sure that you stick to that key concept and that you get some buy-in with other people along the way.
Well, this is, as you were saying that, I thought to myself, wait, you know, it assumes that people are in it for good purposes.
Right.
And reaching across the aisle and trying to find that common ground. And of course, I keep thinking across the river to Capitol Hill with the current Senate Minority Leader saying their goal is to ensure the president doesn't get reelected. And I thought that's a little hard. You don't find a medium ground between the opposition party and yourself when their goal is to defeat you. So we have to assume that's not what people normally do, that there's a way of working with other folks and sort of trying to see what they're all about and hoping their vision is something a little broader than I want to be in power.
And that's where, as a leader, you really have to take that upper hand to, in and of yourself, have as that personal goal to find out where do people sit? Where are their goals? Where are they as a leader? I found in doing research for my book, in fact, that we know that people sometimes just show up, that they deem themselves a leader by just sort of being there in the seat. We have other people who want to really accomplish something and jump right on in. And then we have people like a Shirley Chisholm or Cesar Chavez or Martin Luther King who are there and they're transformational leaders who are in for something beyond themselves. And so how do we really think in terms of what is it that we need to really pair up with someone else who we don't see eye to eye with and get past the dissension?
Yeah, that's a very tough thing to be in this day and age, I must say. You also mentioned mentors and proteges and cultivating proteges. Now, how do you go about, as a practical matter, for example? I mean, we have all these openings coming up on our school board, and certainly there are people raising their hands and saying, I want to run. But if you're looking around and saying, this is the kind of person that I want, it can't be me for whatever reason, how do you go out and identify proteges? In your case, you had decided you weren't going to run again. So how do you do that? How do you find those people that you think are going to share your vision, are going to have the skills that they need to do it, are going to have all the fortitude and all the things that we've talked about? Where do you find them?
Well, you really look right in your community, right there, and in the work that you do side by side with people, you know in some ways already that they may be someone who could potentially be in a position. You know someone who may have said, hey, you know what, I might be interested one day, and I'm thinking about this, but I'm a little gun shy, or I'm not quite sure I have all of the know-how. These are the people who you really need to sort of tap on the shoulder. But it's also about looking in the forums where we know that these leaders are. Community organizations, sometimes we see them out and about doing things, or maybe the agitators even. They are the folks who we may not agree with, but they may be someone who is capable and willing and interested. And so how do we really cultivate and nurture? One of the things I talk about in the role that I had was about being able to not only be nurtured myself, but support and nurture others, and cultivating proteges to make sure that we were taking the time to say, what do we need to do? What skills do we need to work on? And so really looking out beyond the scope of where we may. A lot of colleges actually are really doing, I think, some training these days after the last set of national elections. We see a lot more involvement from our youth. And so that is another opportunity for people to really tap that resource.
Now, how do you find the time? I know we're going to go this back to time management. It's apparently becoming my favorite topic. But you talk about being a mentor to these folks, and you're already, you know, full-time job. You had family things with your mom. You got board meetings that are going beyond midnight, and now you're going to have to try and do some mentoring.
Exactly.
I mean, that's like
exactly, and that, in fact, that was the transition that I made when I was in office and made the transition out of office. I was being tapped on the shoulder or asked to help people around the state to say, can you help us? We're thinking about running a campaign, or can you help us? We need some training here with our community organization, you know, getting our vision together. Or particular people who were running for an office said, I want to run for this position, can you help me get there? And so knowing that I took a little bit of time out each day to categorize, you know, how I was going to help someone, what support I was going to provide, and making sure I was not encroaching on my self-care, that balance, and making sure to keep that in sort of all the same way in line.
Well, it sounds like that's sort of the perfect segue into your number 6 of your leadership building blocks, which is fortitude. Because trying to be resourceful, trying to deal with all of these things at the same time, it's got to take a level of commitment that is pretty remarkable. So talk about what people have to have when you say fortitude as a leadership building block. What are we doing?
Well, it's being able to deal with the unexpected, being able to deal with the unknown. And we've seen so many times leaders have to deal with crisis situations. And really, in my instance, it wasn't just sort of a big set of issues at the very beginning of the tenure, but as with any community group or with any government agency, there are issues that come up, emergencies that happen. I wrote a chapter called Loopholes, Potholes, and Craters to talk exactly about that, and to really sort of put into those categories things that you don't expect, that you know will happen, but things that you don't know will happen. And so really being able to have the fortitude to go through, even in the unknown. And it really is about, again, building upon those first few building blocks and bringing all of that forward, and then this next building block to say, okay, you don't know what's happening next, but hold your ground.
Hold your ground.
Yes.
Well, I noticed in this section you had on fortitude about the exemplary communication skills, verbal, written, whatever, and how it doesn't matter what's going on and what you're facing, rolling your eyes and being snarky is not going to help you with your vision and getting to where you want to go. And I've seen some people who do that, and I just am like, is that necessary? Is that really necessary? I don't think so. Let's talk about 7, which was infinite possibilities in your current or future roles, and then also your commitment to a legacy. So what's that final leadership step?
The final leadership step, I believe, is about not just leaving and exiting the role, but it's about finding out how you're going to exit, what you want to leave behind, and also how will you leave the legacy. Let me just break that down a little bit. So when I talk about exiting, I didn't just leave the community. I made sure to do a formal announcement to all of my supporters, making sure to let them know I was not seeking re-election, purposefully was going to step away, then that I was going to still be involved in issues and support, but that I needed to shift my role from being in the system to being on the outside. The second part is about deciding how and what was I going to leave behind. I left behind a legacy of accountability, of making sure to do policy analysis and making sure that we had checks and balances in place, that there was sort of a new way of looking at the board and the superintendent role, and making sure that there was real clarity about the expectation. And then finally, in the work that I now do, it really led me to the work of leadership, because it wasn't just about being in politics, it was about how to develop and cultivate a leadership role. Let me give you an example. My aunts and my grandmother are all quilters, and they all have these patchwork quilts that they develop and tell a story. And I felt like I had a story to tell with all of the pieces of not just my experience on the school board, but my years as a nonprofit executive. Pulling it all together in a legacy format is what every leader should do. And they should make sure that they have a continuum so that it's not just about I was here and I did this, but about making sure you tell the story and you help bring someone else along at the end of your tenure.
Okay. Well, we have gotten through the 7 leadership building blocks, and we have got about a minute left. So I want to give you about 30 seconds of that and say we've got elections up and down, from dog catcher to board of supervisors and whatnot this year in Virginia. What's your message to somebody who's thinking about running?
I tell them go for it, absolutely. I think that every person who has the vision, who has the passion, who has the interest, should explore the potential of doing something greater in their community, of giving back. I think that this sort of effort of saying, I'm a leader just for leader's sake, is not anything that people should do. They should really take an assessment, take stock, and I'm excited that Leadership Building Blocks is something that help people do that.
Well, thank you so much for coming, Dawn. It has been very informative for me, and I want to hold it up again. Leadership Building Blocks is Dawn McCoy's book, and I do encourage anybody who's thinking of running, of reading it. Buy it, read it. It's got some great assessment tools. We've got a lot of things to do here in Virginia. Thanks for being with us. Women Talk Business. We'll see you the next time.